Then move on. Joe, give us an overview, if you would, please, of item 8, and first tell us how you're going to approach the range of issues.
How we're going to approach the ranges?
Yeah, you've got a bunch of stuff. Just walk us through the subjects to be covered.
Okay, and
or maybe Dan's going to be
Dan
doing
Ray
it. Okay.
And Cindy Messer.
Okay,
and
Dan and Cindy. Okay.
Since I was sick last week,
right.
Dan actually was the principal author, and Cindy was probably the real principal author of this staff report. And Dan reviewed it and made sure it was done right. So I'll defer to him.
Yeah, we are tag teaming this today, so that's one of the things we got. And what we're trying to do is, as we struggle to pound the Delta plan into shape and get it out to you in what we hope will be the final staff version over the coming month, we're trying to keep you apprised of where we're at, be continually talking with you about those items where we're hoping to get some policy direction so we can bring you a plan that's closer to a shape where you're willing to approve it. And then to touch base with you as we develop materials that you're interested in, such as the graphics for the plan, and let you know how we're dealing with the comments that we've received as they come in the door. So what we've tried to do is sweep up a number of those items into this presentation to you about the Delta plan now. And so we could spend a little bit of time talking about
we've done the EIR discussion. That was one that Gwen had done for us.
Yeah, so we've dealt with really the first item that we were hoping to cover in the agenda. That was major comments on the Delta Plan EIR. If you're on the memo, on page 2 of the memo.
And before we start, is the timing of the 6th draft the same? Has it slipped?
I'm trying to remember what we told you last month. It has slipped internally. We had been hoping we'd be able to bring you the plan in a couple of weeks. Really now we're looking more towards the meeting at the end of May. We're having to do quite a bit of editing to get things in a shape that it's going to be.
Is that a real date now? The end of May? Are you committed to that?
I am. Yeah. No, we've got.
So
we are right. We're
turning.
Yeah. No, we're our schedule, and I can tell you as the editor of 3 of the 7-8 chapters in the plan, we're going to be turning text over to our consulting team no later than the close of business tomorrow. A significant portion of it is already in their hands.
And the executive summary?
The executive summary is being drafted as we're sitting here by our staff back in the office.
So do we have a firm date at the end of May?
Might have to pull my calendar out and let you know, but it's the May meeting in the second, late in May. You don't have it.
I do. I was going to see where you were going.
Yeah.
But so right now, the date that we're looking at for releasing the final staff draft, as we're calling it, is May 14th. And that is because that is the 10 days before the May council meeting. So for notification
24th
purposes.
of May.
24th. So. And so what we're doing, as Dan mentioned, we are in the process of getting all of the final materials, graphics, text, over to our consulting team by close of business tomorrow, and that kicks off the production period. And that's we've kind of got it nailed down to the amount of time they need to do copy editing, proofing, formatting, and then printing. And we'll have one more shot at an internal review, a few of us, just when they piece everything together, so we can make sure it's.
So it'll be available to the council on?
May 14th.
May 14th, thanks.
I'm putting it out there.
And if you've been involved in producing a publication at this scale, I think this is the 4th time I've done this. At this stage especially, it's a maddening process while you're trying to go through and make sure you've got every graphic in shape, every figure properly titled, you've got all your facts checked. Text is being revised, and we'll probably get some text revised as a result of our conversation today. And, of course, we're hoping to have it all turned in by 5 tomorrow. So there's been a lot of work going on back in the office. And I would fully expect that there'll be a few details we'll be tinkering with over the coming week. And then again, we'll hear from you all when we get it released, and we'll be making additional adjustments then.
Okay. Give us then other comments you need on subsection 8B, which is development of the final draft Delta plan, other than what you've said.
We pretty much have covered that. Two things I guess I would add is one of the major items that we're working on or have been working on is developing a more robust big picture for the plan. It's one of the things that we heard in the past. When we actually had a little bit of time to take a step back as staff and kind of look at where the final staff draft is at, we realized we needed to really beef that up. And so we've been spending a lot of time working on that. The picture will be, why is there the plan? Where is it going? What is the vision? What has gotten us to this point? How does that integrate with the various chapters, the different subject areas? So a lot of time, a lot of staff time is being spent on that. You'll see that as part of Chapter 1, the introductory chapter for the Delta Plan. But we're also taking a really good look at the various chapters. And again, kind of what we've been doing is doing a bit of restructuring of the chapters to feed into that big picture for flow, for readability. So that's been taking up quite a bit of time as well. I think we mentioned either at the last meeting or the one before that we've actually moved some chapters around. So everybody will see that the chapter order has changed. And the reason for that is to bring a couple of the chapters more to the front, the water supply reliability, the ecosystem restoration chapters, since those are addressing the co-equal goals, we kind of want to have those up in the forefront of the draft plan. Which reminds me to say that in doing all of this, some of the numbering has changed for the policies and the recommendations. And so I apologize because I know there's probably confusion as we're moving through some of these matrices we're presenting to you and some of the text. It's a way for us to keep from going crazy is just to go with the latest numbering convention. So that will change just in shifting things around in the chapters. So, for example, and the one I did want to bring up is in the matrix, I think it's the next attachment in the staff report, we talk about recommendation WRR3, which used to be WRR5. So just hopefully that provides a little clarity.
Just a suggestion, you'll probably do it anyway, but on the cover page, we've in previous versions, we've already had this cover page that kind of summarizes the chronology and all of that. I think that's the place where you put, we've merged Chapter X with Chapter X, we've renumbered the sequences. I mean, because the reader will want to start with just a mechanical way to compare the 6th draft to the 5th draft.
And I think that was the major points we wanted to cover in that second section, I guess, of the staff report.
Okay, so do you want to start walking through the matrix, Mr. Ray?
Yeah.
Mr. Messer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what these are policies that are recommendations that we had thought deserved your attention before we tried to put the final staff draft to bed. They are either items that have been were raised by the Delta Protection Commission, and it's a proposal to protect the Delta as a place, and we were trying to get your guidance on how to incorporate those into the Delta plan, or else they were items that were sources of ongoing controversy from stakeholder comments, and we brought those to you, and these are the few that we still had not resolved. And the first, there are 4 of those. One deals with water quality in the Delta. There's 2 that deal with policies for guiding the development in the Delta. And the third is what had been WRR3, now WRR5, as Cindy said, now WRR3, which is one of the recommendations for how we can reduce folks' reliance on the Delta for the water supply and through coordination with the water board on water rights issues. I think we'll start, with the water quality policy. And what I found easiest myself was if I just tore this spreadsheet out. So I had it next to me when I was going through the discussion, and I could use that together with the memo. And of course, we start just backing up. Why are we talking about water quality? The Delta Reform Act talks about the importance of protecting Delta water quality a number of different ways. In Section 85020E, it says that we need to improve water quality and achieve the water quality objectives, which refers back then to the Water Board's water quality planning program. 85022 E6 says that the goals for the plan should include improving water quality. And 85302D3, which talks about strategies that ought to be included in the plan, said there should be measures that improve water quality. And you've done that in the past with a chapter that includes some recommendations about things the water board ought to be doing to not just complete the update of the flow objectives, but also follow through on TMDLs, the water quality control strategies for various stressors that affect the Delta. When the Delta Protection Commission submitted its proposal to protect the Delta as a place, it included 2 policy recommendations about protecting water quality, and they were both focused on economic uses of water in the Delta. One was a recommendation that we have a policy that would protect water quality for agriculture, and another was that we'd have a policy that would protect water quality for municipal and industrial uses. And of course, especially in Contra Costa and San Joaquin counties, there's a lot of industry that depends on water quality from the Delta. Contra Costa is one of the most industrialized, I was surprised to learn, one of the most industrialized counties in the United States, in large part derived from the heavy industry that's been located along the shore of Pittsburgh and Antioch, initially drawn on water right out of the Delta, and now using more water from the Contra Costa Canal. And so the Protection Commission had suggested we have policies added to the plan that would protect water quality for those uses. And in thinking about it and looking back through the comments that we had received from other in-Delta users, comments on the plan, and from members of the environmental community, we realized that there also had been many comments urging us, from others, urging us to include provisions to protect water quality. And so our suggestion was that we add a policy to the plan that would say that water quality in the Delta should be maintained at a level that supports all kinds of beneficial uses, not just the industrial and the municipal and the agricultural ones that the DPC had proposed, not just the environmental uses, but recognize that there are a variety of beneficial uses that need to be protected, and that seems logical to us. Certainly, a water supply is not reliable if it's not clean enough that you can use it for the purposes that you need. And if we're going to protect an aquatic ecosystem, that starts with protecting water quality. We can't have healthy estuaries and healthy wetlands and healthy rivers if we don't have water that's clean enough for those purposes. And that's so the sort of the fundamental intellectual basis of it. And then what we tried to do was look and say, okay, how's that being done now? Well, the water board does that. We're not expecting that either you or we would be involved in identifying what the water quality standards want to be, and that's really a job of the water board. They do that through their regional planning processes. And so what our proposal was to have a policy that with actions that were proposed in the Delta ought to evaluate what their effects on water quality would be, and that if they met the standards that the water boards had established and they were in compliance with the board's plans, their policies, and their waste discharge requirements or waiver conditions, that they could show that they were in compliance with the policy. So that's how it would work on a covered action basis. You would show you were complying with the water board's program. One of the reasons that we've set it up this way is based on the experience that we see in San Francisco Bay and on the coast, where, again, in those situations you've got state planning agencies that are responsible for having broad oversight. Their plans all have policies that say, hey, water quality needs to be protected, but they recognize that the water boards have the primary responsibility for that, and so they're not in a position to interfere with their determinations. But there are also situations where at times the water board doesn't have the kind of regulatory control that might be needed to protect water quality. Those are smaller than they used to be, as the water board has adopted regulations for stormwater that they didn't have in the 80s, or for agricultural return flows that they didn't have a little while ago. But there are still some areas where the water board doesn't have control, and so in those cases where there were no standards from the water board and the water board didn't have a regulatory program, then the agency that was responsible for the covered action would have the opportunity to look at these impacts and take some kind of action. And that could be a basis for appeal to the council. Now, when we discussed it with you last time, several council members thought
There were only 4 of us left at the time.
Yeah, it was late in the day. Yeah.
I think it was the last item.
Yeah. Several council members said, wait a minute, we don't want to be in a situation where we have duplicate jurisdiction. We don't want to be have us getting tangled up with them. And we don't see this as necessary. What's the problem? And so you asked us to come back, identifying what the problem was, and then to see if we could give you some alternatives for how we might approach it. So if we look at the Water Board's regulatory, now we've got our water quality guys here, so if you got more detailed questions, we'll ask Sam and Mark to come up. If you look at the Water Board's authorities, one of the areas where we realize they don't have the kind of controls you might want to have in the Delta is in the area of stormwater. Because while with a point source discharge like an effluent from a wastewater treatment plant or an industry, they're actually setting an effluent guideline there. Your discharge has to be this clean. But in the stormwater situation, what they're really doing is saying, hey, these are the kind of best practices you have to use to manage your stormwater system, but they don't have an effluent guideline for discharge. And we can see many places in California where stormwater discharges, especially from expanding urban areas, are now the most significant contributor to local water quality problems. And particularly where we're proposing to identify and ultimately invest in millions of dollars in the restoration of aquatic ecosystems, if we're not able to manage those to control stormwater more effectively than we do now, we may find that we're not able to fully achieve the ecosystem health that we're trying to get in those restoration areas. One of the ways we see this in our own staff has been in evaluation, looking at stormwater management between Contra Costa County, which is in the San Francisco Bay Water Board's jurisdiction, and then Sacramento and San Joaquin counties, which are in the Central Valley jurisdiction. And so when we look at the stormwater planning that's done in Contra Costa, where they have a very thoughtful and involved program to protect the health of urban creeks in Contra Costa, and we compare that with what we see in Sacramento and San Joaquin, we see that the level of protection that we're accomplishing over here in the Central Valley portions of the jurisdiction is not as high as what we're seeing in the Contra Costa and the Bay Area jurisdiction. So if we're really trying to protect the health of these restoration areas as we start to invest in their rehabilitation and restoration, maybe we want to make sure we've got the best possible protections in those areas. So that would be one example of a case where right now the regulatory jurisdiction of the Water Board is not as thorough as it might be. What we've tried to do in terms of giving you suggestions of alternatives you might approach this is give you 2 or 3 different choices. One would be, and then we can refer back here to the spreadsheet again. One would be to keep the policy as we've proposed it, so that would be the policy that's on the left-hand side of the spreadsheet. That's water quality policy 1, and then again that would say the water quality and the delta ought to be protected for beneficial uses, and it refers back to the Water Board's standards. A second would be a slightly different approach, and that would be rather than having a policy in the Delta Plan about water quality, would be to make a recommendation to the Water Board that they would do something they do on the coastal areas, but that they haven't done in the Delta, and that's identify areas of a special biological significance where they would then improve their water quality standards to provide a little more extraordinary protection. One of the beneficial uses of water in California is the protection of outstanding areas of biological productivity, and on the coast they use that, for example, for like the intertidal reefs off Point Lobos in Monterey, or the shorelines of Redwood National Park and portions of the Point Reyes Seashore shoreline. We don't have anything like that in the Central Valley plan, and so maybe one approach we'd want to recommend to them would be, hey, where we're going to have these restoration areas going forward, they're identified as restoration opportunity areas in the Delta plan, would be to ask the Water Board to put together some special regulations in those areas. Now, on the coast, that has been focused both on point source discharges, which are not permitted in those locations, and also focused on improved management for stormwater. Now, we got 5 of these restoration opportunity areas in the Delta Plan. 3 of them are located in areas where it's hard to see that there's going to be, in the short term, you might be farm drainage into those areas, but it's hard to see where there'd be much urban drainage into them. And you can, if you got this map that was in the plan, you can see them. One is Cache Slough. It's over here in eastern Solano County. It's an agricultural area. It's got some farm drains that focus on it. Another is the downstream end of the Yolo bypass. Again, that's a ways away from West Sacramento and influenced primarily by farm drainage. A third is the area that's at the western end of the Cosumnes Preserve. So again, that's Elk Grove is quite a bit away from there. It's an expanding community, but you got a lot of room to go before that. But then you have the areas that are off the in the southern part of the Delta, between Stockton and Manteca, Lathrop area, and this Tracy over here. So that's an area that's likely to be more influenced by stormwater. And then, of course, the Soon Marsh, which is one of the really important restoration areas in the Delta. And you can see surrounded by Fairfield and Fairfield over here and the community of Benicia over here. So as those continue to develop, then the stormwater impacts there are potentially larger. So that would be an example of the kinds of areas that we could protect if this recommendation was included in the Delta Plan and the Water Board acted on it. Now, it is true, stormwater management, that's a cost that local governments have to bear. And so you can't have better protection of areas without having a little additional cost. And I don't want to hide that in this recommendation. A third approach would be to have no policy. Just leave it as it is, We're not, and just have the Delta Plan go forward without a specific policy other than the recommendations about the TMDLs and the flows that are in the draft that we released last fall. And then another approach would be, the final one would be to establish a sub-goal, which we haven't done previously, but it's sort of a middle ground. Section 85302E of the Delta Reform Act says that the plan can include sub-goals and strategies. And we haven't done the sub-goal part of it. We just focused on the strategies. But we could include a sub-goal that would include what had been sort of a policy statement. It could be sort of a statement of the aspirations of the council for protecting water quality consistent with the Water Board's plans. It would provide a basis, for example, for commenting on environmental impact reports. But it wouldn't have any regulatory authority that would be connected to it. And so in that case, it wouldn't involve either the approving agencies or the Council on Appeal when they're dealing with a covered action from having to worry about the details of it all. But it would provide a mechanism for, if there was something that people thought was just egregious, for writing letters on environmental impact reports and doing that kind of work. And it's conceivable that you could combine option 4, the sub-goal about water quality, with option 2, the recommendation that the Water Board take action to improve protection in these restoration opportunity areas. And that would be a little combination approach there. So those are the alternative ways we thought we might address that approach.
Bill.
Don?
Yeah. Thanks, Dan, for the overview. And I helped to clarify a couple of questions that came to my mind as I read this. But I want to understand, kind of back to some of your latter comments about, when you look at the watersheds, and you talk about the restoration opportunity areas, I kind of took it, and I appreciate the explanation, but you convey a special status, you use the equivalent of the areas of significance, special biological significance along the coast, I guess. But when you look at the areas, and you described them on the map, and I had taken the liberty of using this map, kind of my comparison even prior to you calling it out, is that you can take the Cosumnes-McCullough watershed, for example, and you can look at where Lodi sits relative to the McCollum or Galt or even upstream Ione that sit on those watersheds that, and I'm not talking about wastewater so much as stormwater component here, that most of your systems may either certainly directly or indirectly drain into your watersheds, your watercourses. I mean, that's a matter of fact. But and I think a lot of jurisdictions have gone to, at least I'm familiar certainly with those in Sacramento County, where you've gone to higher levels of trying to catch certain types of constituents in parking lots or in areas to have them filtered before they would reach the storm drains and then get into the rivers and streams and tributaries and so forth. It may not be nearly as intensive as you mentioned Contra Costa County. Again, I'm not that familiar with what they're doing there, but so I guess my first question though is, so what is the reach of this? Because if you convey this special status, for example, I'll just take the Cosumnes McCollum confluence in the preserve there, and we've got these now hatch marked red areas that shows the recreation opportunity areas, and this suggested, at least in some of the policy discussion, that you could go as far as restricting one or prohibiting any new discharges. And just so we've had the discussion about the debate, how far upstream relative to water transfers and so forth, how far does this go as it relates to that? Is it just confined to the area that's immediately adjacent, that's within the legal definition of the delta, or is it, that watershed goes all the way up to the Sierras, and it does in most of these cases, even in the Sacramento, when you think about stormwater discharge or agricultural discharge that could work its way either to the Yellow bypass at certain times of the year when the weir is opened, or might work its way westerly. So kind of help me understand what the staff was thinking as related to that, and again, with maybe the legal application of that as well. I'm trying to get some sense about that. So.
Well, in terms of the recommendation of the Water Board, the option 2, that they identify these areas as deserving of a special treatment in the water plan and perhaps a higher standard of water quality protection, or at least special attention to the protection of their water quality. What we would be recommending, we'd be suggesting you recommend, is that these areas receive, special protection to make sure that their outstanding habitat opportunities are protected. And it would be up to the Water Board to set the standard. And so how they did that, how extensive it would be, I think would be a matter we would leave to them in that instance.
Well, then help me understand then what's been the history. Is it everybody that's upstream of an area? Or is it a distance type of thing? I mean, maybe the Water Board's determination. But
yeah.
So again, I don't expect you, if you don't have the answer, you don't have it. But for those that sit on the tributaries, it could be any one of these jurisdictions, and where the flow is basically you're upstream, and it's going to work its way downstream. So that they start up on the tip of the Sierras, for example, in the Cosumnes watershed, and everybody that has stormwater, if you have an area that ultimately ends up down here, do you get tagged, or is it just the one that's closest? Is it the city of Galt or city of Lodi because you're on the McCollum watershed? It may be an unknown, but I'm trying to get some sense about how that works.
On this,